Welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings here in Mendham. So this is a second beginning. Well, it's really the first beginning to the video, and there'll be another one later. Just because I figured I'll throw this in because it is kind of a long video, and it wasn't exactly what I anticipated. And so I just thought I'd throw in a fair warning or something that maybe this last hour is better than the first hour. For casual thinkers, because it's about evolution, and the first half ends up being a little bit abiogenesis stuff, which really isn't a subject that gets interesting in terms of how humans got here. And I think that's the more important or the more interesting subject. There's two things now in the universe. There's sensation, all of the little critters with brains are doing, and then there's the intelligent thinking thing, and we really don't know what the odds of either one of those things emerging from the soup. Could have been extraordinarily unlikely events that our brains would be able to synthesize a sensation, and likewise it might be an insanely improbable event that you could have all the great apes on Earth, and how long it would take for them to become language enabled and capable of doing what we did, which is become thinking devices, concepts, abstractions, doing all of the stuff it takes to do that reasoning and logic thing on a big scale, even the detail sort of thing, which the other apes can't do. Anyway, and so those are the more interesting, and it really wasn't any part of the video which I thought would say something more than what's already been said before, so it really wasn't. The subject was more about trying to turn the weird luck of the draw into some sort of mathematical thing, and it's really not very rigid math, because there is so much of this fact of one event is 1,000 to 1, the next event is 1,000,000,000,000 to 1. It's all kinds of different lottery tickets that were purchased in the evolution of life on Earth. And a lot of very good organisms died as miscarriages. There could be a great Olympic athlete, never made it because, he ended up in a toilet bowl, before he got started. So the game is so arbitrary that there's not much point in trying to view it through put it through a filter and a microscope and try to figure out some elemental principle, because there isn't much. So anyway, it was mostly partially about the selfish gene and the fact that, and it really didn't even do that justice, in the sense that there wasn't enough of the conversation about the nature of our construction and how capable we are of rising above any instinct or any impulse that we may have, by clearly just understanding, having a better understanding. We can know that candy is fun to eat, and then we can know it's not going to be good for you, that kind of stuff. So we can do a lot better than our impulses, our native sensual preferences. Anyway, so yeah, I think that's enough of a pre-statement, something like that. So anyway, it's a good video. I just don't know if, some people it's just going to be too much, too much not on the direct subject of value. And so there's no value statements in the conversation except for the ones I inject. So anyway, so enough of a preface and such. So now it's 2 hours and 4 minutes, 5 minutes anyway. till the next time and such. Well, till right now, when the video starts again and such. And welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings Here. Ew, in Mendham. With the creeps. Yeah, the creepy in Mendham that has the creeps. Having a marginally tolerable experience of my consciousness. Not very comfortable. Anyway, so Veritasium, who's a science channel, just, quite hateable from my perspective. I, think it's all trash, garbage, junk physics. But anyway, he did a video on evolution, and I didn't play it, but I mean, you're just saying, okay, what's he going to try to capitalize on or cheat on or steal or say that he could possibly say anything meaningful on the subject of evolution? I mean, it's been picked at, so much, and there's really nothing to say. Yes, there's a selfish gene. It's only your genetics that are evolving. You're just the demonstration model for a genetic code. You're you're not really what's happening. It's a molecule that's evolving. Simply put, and you're just the byproduct of the evolution of the molecule. So it's not what you think in that respect. Alright, back. So the other thing about evolution is the fact that the whole punctuated equilibrium argument that all the evolution happens in aberrants, things that drift off from the meme or from the hive or from the main group, small populations, isolated by distance. And then, they become large populations that can take on the old existing model and beat the crap out of it. I guess the human race went through a couple of those transitions where, they moved to a new, they moved north out of Africa. And, then a few thousands of years later, a version that had evolved a little bit better took their place, basically just took over. So it's you could argue that incest creates a lot of mutations, which creates a lot of opportunity for advancement. And all of that is at this insane high price of all these defective models having to be destroyed, generally speaking, in some sort of, less than great way. And everything is killed, so evolution kills everything, and it's really just about when you get killed or how much fun you get to have before you get killed. And we're not really fighting for much in the margins. It really is just a meat grinder, and it's designed that way. It's designed to make a bunch of things, and say force them to compete against each other, and to have really decisive rules about winning and losing. There's no silver or bronze medals. Victory for the winner, and that's it. And their victory is short-lived, and often to be a winner, you have to be more productive, which means you have to work harder, you have to struggle harder, you have to have tools to struggle harder, you have to be more motivated, you have to be more belligerent in your will to live, and take whatever slings and arrows you receive. All of that stuff is going to be rewarded, and fear and apprehension and listless depression won't be rewarded, frankly. But anyway, even though I'd argue that's the rational response to being a participant in this ghoulish freak show of horror. Anyway, so we'll see if any of that's in the video, the ghoulish freak show of horror. Or will there just be some sort of, it's the greatest show on earth, let's watch crocodiles, eat turtles or something. It would be just so much fun. God, I hate it here. Yeah, this planet sucks so bad. Anyway, I don't know why this viewer is so big. Well, it doesn't matter. So I did download it to evade commercials. And so let's endure the process. Hit the button, Carrie.
If you want to know if someone really understands evolution, just ask them this one weird question.
Why does poop smell bad?
Whoa.
Oh gosh.
Because that's bacteria.
You know, not all poop smells all that bad, frankly. I mean, that's just the truth. So even that's not entirely true. Some poo smells kind of interesting. I mean, you know, it doesn't smell like dinner, but it doesn't, it's not like maggot-infested rotting flesh. So we know why that smells, because it's likely full of all kinds of evil bacteria. So yes, not worthy of eating. Yet there's a whole bunch of people who think we did that. Yeah, for thousands of years we ate carrion. Even though it's the worst possible smell you can smell, we chow down. I mean, these arguments are so stupid. So, I mean, this whole subject is just, you know, the very fact that you have to argue for the fact that we evolved with most of the human race. And then, you know, to have to argue about this kind of crap, you know, that we're not designed to be eating the other sentient creatures on the planet. That wasn't our design. Not that it would matter anyway. Even if it was our design, you'd think we would become sophisticated enough not to enjoy a meal of torture. That we would say, oh yes, let's not eat torture tonight. Let's eat something that isn't tortured. Ugh. It's just so... This is just such a... God, it's just so unpleasant interacting with humans.
Read it, I guess.
Microbiome, bro.
I don't know, you know, this is getting so, you know, the world's gotten so disgusting. I was just watching a physics video, and right in the middle of his video, there was the commercial came on, and it was fart sounds, and then a bunch of talk about not being able to poo. And you're just saying, what the fuck? And I'm sure what they're selling is some sort of pink salt thing or something, some sort of fake cure. Oh, it's just so... I mean, you know, how did we get here? How did we allow this to happen to human civilization?
Trash
Yeah, trash
of
in
the
gut.
body.
The food we eat.
Because of the chemicals.
Farts don't always smell bad.
You know, and the fact is yeah, different poos smell from different animals. You know, they smell different. And obviously dogs will eat poo, you know, so other animals have obviously evolved to be able to handle the bacteria, and we just haven't been. So it's, you don't even know what to make out of that. You know, whether we're the inferior organism because we're not really that durable, that we have to have a mechanism to stop us. You know, from eating the poo.
So, yeah, well, that's a different question entirely. Do you think it objectively smells bad?
Yes, I think so. Yes.
How do you think it smells to fly?
I just can't believe this is a fucking video titled "You Don't Know Evolution If You Don't Know These Facts," and this is a science video, and he's on the street interviewing people about the smell of their poo. I mean, God damn, I did not see this coming. It really is idiocracy. I mean, we just, you know, it's just a matter of how low will it go? How low will it go? We're letting these morons rule the world, and this is what they're making of it.
Eyes.
Like the...
They like it.
Yeah, they like it. Yeah. Animals love stinky things.
Yeah.
They're attracted to it.
Oh, you know, animals love stinky things. You know. Obviously, they have a completely different utility to the sense of smell. And this is one of these evolution arguments I could make. You know, is the reason why we don't have a reservoir of 5 zillion different smells and don't find smelling things all that interesting. I mean, we don't go around, you know, sniffing everything like a dog or a cat. Is the very reason why we're intelligent. Because our brain, instead of being a big brain, became a specialized brain. And so the parts of the brain that were devoted to tasting and smelling and maybe even seeing to some extent were compromised to give us the capacity to do language and abstract conceptual thinking, or however we want to call our more intelligent consciousness. And so that was the sacrifice. You gave away something to get something else.
Poop smells good to flies because poop is full of nutrients.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, it's full of chemicals. Yes, useful chemicals still. Not useful to big organisms, useful to little organisms.
They use it as food, but it's also full of bacteria that can be life-threatening to humans. So the...
right, and it's not bacteria that's life-threatening to other organisms, and that's the catch. You know, they have a system, an immune system that works better than ours. So, yeah, why is that?
The real reason poop smelled bad to us is because if anyone ever thought it smelled good, they would probably get really sick, die, and not pass on their genes. After all, it's about survival of the fittest. But survival of the fittest...
So again, it's just, this isn't something that happens with most organisms. Most organisms can, in fact, ingest the poo of their fellow mates and whatnot. They generally don't need to, because, frankly, it's already been, all the good stuff has already been sucked out of it, frankly. So it's not going to be of much value to them. But in desperation, it can be of, it'll save your life.
What?
I mean, most people think of natural selection as being about the survival of the fittest individual animal.
Well, it really is about individual animals. We are the demonstration models, and the individual demonstration models will decide how the chromosomes, the chemical, the molecule evolves. The molecule can't evolve without us being the suckers to, you know, play out the molecule's wet dream.
Individual.
Individual. Animal.
Animal. Okay, so it's like an individual.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. I mean, individuals best adapted to their environment have increased odds of survival.
Right. So it's the individuals that are the definition of the course of the end result. The individuals are, in fact, the mechanism through which the molecule evolves. It can't evolve without us play acting the script.
And therefore a higher likelihood of passing on their genes. So it follows that each individual should do I
mean, just, you know, all these organisms, all these little things struggle. I mean, okay, this you don't got to worry about because it doesn't have a brain. But all those little things with their eyes blinking and their sense organs and all this stuff and all this torture, all this fucking death. And you people are sitting there mocking it and laughing at it and just pretending it doesn't mean a thing. And it means everything. It's everything we're playing for, and you've missed the obvious, you know, gorilla in the china shop thing. You know, you've missed the thing that needs to be appreciated if you're going to live anything called a decent existence. You're disgracing your intelligence by pretending torture doesn't matter.
Everything it can to survive and reproduce. That is, it should be selfish.
But if that's true, then...
Okay, yeah, so yeah, obviously the selfish part only works when you don't have to go to war. But obviously all these organisms have to go to war with huge groups of other organisms. They have to go to war with a herd. They have to go to war with a tribe. They can't go to war with individuals. They have to go to war with somebody's whole family. So obviously it has to be a gang war. So it's no surprise that we're not so selfish that we would kill our own brother and sister. We're not so selfish that, you know, we don't recognize that we need attachments. We need people to give a shit about us if we're going to survive. We need them to come to our rescue, and we need to be able to go to their rescue. So this is just such a trivial evolutionary fact that obviously, like all the other pack animals, we have a mechanism that bonds us to each other, and we're clearly doing it almost just like animals in the sense that people think their kids are more important than their neighbors' kids. So they're still very nepotistic, they're still very tribal, they're all kinds of racist. And so what's the conversation? Yes, we're playing the same game, and it's just gang warfare. And it's disgusting.
How do you explain this?
I mean, worker bees will sting predators to protect the hive. even though it might kill them.
They don't know it's going to kill them. The salmon don't know when they're going to go upstream that my whole body is going to rot and I'm going to be food for the babies. The babies are going to eat me. They don't know any of this shit. If they knew it, they'd run like hell. They say, fuck this. So that, it's just a big joke. Like somehow, somehow they consciously decided to become slaves. No, they're built as slaves. They're constructed to be a slave.
In the process, female worker ants are sterile, so they can't reproduce. But regardless, they work for the colony for their entire lives.
Yeah, so what? There's people who choose not to reproduce in human civilizations, and they're some of the most productive people in civilization, but it doesn't mean they don't have any fun. So again, I missed out on getting pregnant 473 million times. I mean, who wants to be the queen ant? Who wants to be so fat and incompetent that they have to carry you places? All right, and all you do is shoot eggs all day. Who the fuck would want that job anyway? I'm sure that little ant is saying, I'm so fucking glad I'm sterile. I don't have to do that shit all day.
Until they die. Monkeys adopt orphans. Wolves...
monkeys adopt orphans. Again, orphans that are probably very related to them. That have almost identical genetic heritage and the same grandparents or something like that. Very close to their tribe, their family.
Bring meat to non-hunting members of the pack, and squirrels can let out a...
So again, the fact that dogs and cats are that kind of animal, I mean, you can see it with cats especially, right? I mean, they go out and catch something and they bring it to you and dump it on the table for you. They'll even put it on your table. They recognize that they're part of something, and they have an instinct to make a contribution.
Alarm calls to warn others about nearby predators.
So if natural selection is all about selfish individuals...
All right, so it isn't. Nobody thinks it is. There hasn't been that. Even Dawkins' Selfish Gene book says it's not about organisms being selfish. He knows there's packs. He knows there's tribes. He knows there's schools. He knows there's flocks of birds. He knows there's lots of things that tie organisms to each other's welfare. So a school of fish can do it, for fuck's sake.
Why do we observe so much altruism in nature?
All right, so we don't observe so much. Compared to what? Compared to all the dead ones, all the things, scarred, on the zebras with all the frickin' claw marks on their ass? Oh, come on. It's just so ridiculous. All this love stuff. No, there's not much love stuff compared to the amount of what's in it for me. There's a lot more what's in it for me going on than any love stuff. Even squirrels, I mean, it's just their kids. They don't give nuts to other squirrels for free.
The survival is of the species that can adapt.
I think generally the species.
For the survival of the species. So it's the survival of the species.
Okay. Right. So it's not a species, it's a survival of a genetic line. You're not perpetuating human race unless you think you're some sort of generic human. You're all specialized humans. We're all different. We have different features, and essentially we're fighting for that strain of human, not that species called human. So again, there's very little evidence that any of our behavior is to save the human race. It's to save our family's genetic code.
But survival of the fittest species or the fittest group also doesn't work. I mean, think about what you need for natural selection to occur.
You need something that replicates itself many times over.
I mean, this is just too ridiculous. All you need is a place where the thing has to survive in. And the one that maximizes its survival reproduces more, and the more it reproduces, the more it suffocates everything else, the more everything else starves to death. Not that complicated. I've used fungus as an example of all the balances that exist in nature, and that organisms really had to prevent themselves from being too successful, because success is dangerous. So funguses, for example, they should be everywhere. Everything should be covered with a fungus, and mold. Everything should be covered with it because it's just so durable, so well designed. But the fact is, if it covered everything, then everything would try to figure out how to eat it. So everything would have a huge advantage to be able to metabolize funguses and molds because, they'd be huge because the food would be everywhere. You just lick anything and you could get your meal. So it doesn't want to be, it's not in its interest to be too successful. Success means you become a prey animal. And that's what you don't want to be. You don't want to be some other organism's food.
Creating copies, and then you need a pruning process whereby some of those copies get eliminated and some thrive to go on and create more copies. The problem with groups
So pruning process means either an environment of bacteria, an environment of predators, an environment of temperature, an environment of, hurricanes. All you need is an environmental challenge to overcome. And there'll be people who overcome it well and individuals who overcome it badly. And, guess who gets into the future?
Species as a whole is that they don't typically make copies of themselves. So you almost never get copies of groups fighting other copies of groups to see which groups win out.
Right. So, but I'm just saying it's copies of groups. You can't copy a group, so I don't even know why that was a premise. But obviously, like Indian tribes, you can have some diversity in the families because they could have 1,000 years of minor contact, and then because of the fact that one of them is successful, it spreads a little, gets closer to some other one, and now there's a new thing to fight against, and it might be better than you were. So you could see that happening with the Native Americans in North America. They were all sort of doomed because the South American Indians had the huge technology advantage, and they were consuming, the Incas were consuming everyone. They were just going to take all the territory. And that's what the Pueblos were sort of the first version of that, and all of that organized success, having real buildings to live in, doing farming, all of that was going to take over anyway. So as bad as the Europeans were, the Incas weren't going to be any nicer. the North American Indians were pretty much doomed because they just hadn't acquired the technology to survive.
So if it's not survival of the fittest individual, then
So that's the funny part, right? It's not just about your genetics. It's about whether you have a super scientist like a Newton or something. If your tribe doesn't produce some kids who get interested in trying to figure out how the world works, your tribe doesn't advance because it doesn't get to understand what the moon is doing and seasons, and it doesn't understand weather patterns, and it doesn't understand any of this stuff, so it can't prepare for them, it can't create irrigation, it can't do a lot of things. And so it's not so much about your genetic code, it ends up just being about the happenstance of whether you had a scientist that revealed a useful truth. And so it's all that kind of thing, just the incidental event of having somebody who revealed the truth.
It's not survival of the fittest group, then what is it? Well, to explain that, I want to take you on a little journey.
Oh, you're such a pretentious, obnoxious shit. You're going to explain everything to everybody. So this is an asshole who thinks electricity doesn't travel through the wire. He thinks it's all induction somehow. So even though you can melt wires really easily with electricity, he thinks the electricity is outside the wire. Too fucking idiotic.
All the way back to the beginnings of the Earth.
So you really don't need to go this far back, but because now you're not doing really, the real game of evolution doesn't start in the beginning because that's just chemistry, frankly. You really don't, this is, if you're going to talk about building the first cell and all of that kind of stuff has to happen before the DNA molecule can even do anything. The DNA molecule is crippled in space by itself in the environment. I throw a bunch of DNA on the ground, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to make it. It needs a specialized chemical environment. It needs to be cut in half, and then it needs to have an environment that's filtered so it can just attach to the right kind of other chemistry, and it doesn't attach to arsenic or some other kind of crap that'll ruin it. What is this crap?
Where we are now, there is nothing. Well, not really nothing, but nothing interesting. There are only simple...
Yeah, right. It's just interesting to a human. So right now, in the beginning, there was just electrons and protons and the force that pushed them around. And then they, through this process of being hit by force and consolidating, the creation of gravity. So I could explain that to you, but this audience really doesn't want to know anything about the truth, so I won't bother. You know, but it's so simple, and the shit they teach is such a sloppy pile of crap.
Things like these blobs. This one might be a carbon dioxide molecule, or it might be cyanide. We don't know for sure what they are, but we do know that these compounds are very simple. So for now, they'll just be blobs floating around our void.
All right, so this is really, you could write many books on whatever the evolution of chemistry is to get to the point of a replicating cell. So it's a huge amount of chemistry that has to take place before you even get to a reproducing cell. And it's only when you start having reproducing cells that you can talk about how evolution really works in terms of creating a bunch of spawn to kill each other and have this gladiator war. So the gladiator war doesn't start in the beginning. It only, the evolution race only starts once you have that single cell, okay, that replicates itself, the cell wall and the nucleus. Well, not the nucleus, but the DNA.
In fact, much of what we'll encounter along our journey here are just hypotheses. A lot of Earth's early history is still a mystery, so keep that in mind.
Well, you can keep something in mind, too. You can notice obvious things like cells are round, okay, so, and like a water drop. And you could sort of understand that, yes, a water drop could get dirty with chemistry on the outside, that this little tiny device could be an insulated environment in which a DNA molecule could find it a lot more comfortable and survivable to survive inside of that water drop, and that you could understand how you could break the molecule by crashing it on the rocks. And so there's lots of ways you could speculate regarding how these first single cellular machines were made. But frankly, it's not the interesting part of evolution. It's an interesting science question, but it's not an interesting, if you want to understand how we went from being green slime to being a human being.
Now, every so often, our blobs get a surplus of energy, maybe from a ray of UV light or a nearby hot source. This is the first major upgrade to our void.
Alright, so that's just bullshit. So the Earth was always hot. A billion years ago, the Earth was hot. Okay, lots of warm environments, lots of still lava, steam vents, all kinds of stuff. So it's just kind of silly. It's just heat. You don't need a special infrared, or you don't need an ultraviolet, and you don't need any of that crap. Just regular infrared radiation will create enough molecules banging into each other to create active chemistry. Active chemistry doesn't need much of a temperature increase. It doesn't need it to be 500 degrees. It just needs it to be warm enough to bang things into each other.
Excess energy, as it allows our blobs to interact with each other. Most of the time, this
that happened from the very beginning. They didn't become blobs because they did already interact. So again, this whole argument that somehow the coldness of space is cold. Well, it really isn't. Minus 300 degrees Celsius is still things moving. It's not dead. It's not stopped.
Action leads to nothing. But sometimes these blobs can combine into more complicated compounds.
Yeah, so that's hardly, I don't even think that's worth mentioning to his audience, frankly. I mean, any part of his audience doesn't know how you make compounds by combining molecules. Yeah, duh.
Here's a simple simulated example where we only have 4 red blobs. Right now, they are all individual particles, but each time step we move forward, let's say there's a 10% chance that all 4 combine into one red megablob. Now imagine this megablob isn't...
Obviously, so the megablob wouldn't be just magically flung together. It would be flung together by either charge, electrostatic forces, or gravity. You could argue. So that's what the universe does. It gives pieces of matter, electrons and protons, it gives them momentum. And the price of giving them momentum, that is, if I push something in your direction, that means the force that pushed it in your direction didn't hit you, right? The force was going to hit you. I put something in the way. The force hit it. So obviously it's going to move towards you. And the special bonus is the force that was going to hit you and push you away isn't going to show up. So not only are you not moving away, which you would have been doing, it's moving towards you. That's gravity. Oh, it's all so simple, and these fucktarded scientists have ruined everything.
Very
I mean, they can't touch a scientific subject without fucking it in the butt.
Stable. For every time step it's alive, it has a 95% chance of falling apart back into the 4 smaller blobs. If we add more of these red blobs into the mix, you'll notice that they rarely ever come together.
So none of this has anything to do with the subject, frankly. This isn't how chromosomes evolve.
On average, a megablob only exists around 10% of the time. But if we were to reduce the chances of the megablobs dissolving to only 1%, the void would suddenly be filled with them. This fact hints at an important law that governs our void.
Oh, brother, hints. Hint. Yeah, I ain't getting the hint.
The law of stability. Unstable blobs fall apart and vanish.
Oh, look, we already know that for atoms. So, I mean, there's only 100, there's less, 90-something stable atomic configurations. Well, if you add the isotopes, it could be quite a lot more. But there's only what we would call carbon, or what we would call lithium, that kind of stuff. So we already know the geometry is limited. There's a limited way these things stick to each other. There's not an unlimited way. There's a limited way. They have to follow certain rules to be able to clump. They can't clump any old way.
Stable ones endure. Now watch what happens if we speed this up dramatically. Maybe a couple of years per second, maybe even a couple million. You can see our blobs keep getting random jolts of energy, so they combine with others to form more complex compounds. Most attempts fail and fall apart, but every so often, by pure chance...
So, this is just, again, one made-up version, and you could come up with lots of other versions of how the clumping happens in the first place, and how, if it does happen, how likely it is to fall apart. I mean, I think the argument would be atomically that, once something does attach, it means it got through a barrier. That means it had enough energy to push through some barrier, broke the thing that existed, and made a new thing. And the new thing ain't going to fall apart that easy. A lot of chemistry, like water, it's not that easy to break water into hydrogen and oxygen, right? You have to do the whole electrolysis thing. You really have to antagonize the atoms to separate them into their components. So I mean, something as basic to life on Earth anyway, like water, is showing exactly the opposite of this nonsense. Once you make a water molecule, it's a lot harder. It's a lot easier to make one. Just introduce hydrogen to oxygen. You almost made it for free. And it's really hard to break it once you made one. So this is sort of just fucking bullshit.
You get a compound that is more stable than the blobs it's made of. This doesn't happen because the blobs want to build more complex structures. It's just because these new configurations happen to be more favorable in the environment. And
no, they protect each other. So it's just like you're saying, look, if I put a whole bunch of this stuff together, the stuff on the inside isn't going to be exposed to radiation. It isn't going to be exposed to anything. So if I can make the clumps bigger and bigger, I create a whole new insulated environment that's a lot harder to break all of them because you have to get through the layers. So, you're creating new environments by creating bigger and bigger molecules. The stuff on the inside is essentially insulated from reality. And a lot of molecules create that kind of environment. Like a water molecule, again, when it freezes, it creates a geometric structure that's really hard to mess with.
Now, when these complicated compounds become abundant enough, they too get a chance to combine, making our void increasingly complex. And one day, by accident, this causes an extremely unique shape to...
So whatever by accident means. There's no accident. So again, nothing ever happened randomly. All of it's written in the process of these physical laws. So as long as you know the physical laws and you know where all the electrons and protons are, you know what the future is. Except, there's gazillions and zillions and zillions and zillionized. Yeah, a zillionized. So yeah, it's a little too much to keep track of.
Form, one with a special property. See, the blobs it's made of just happen to attract similar blobs from the surrounding environment.
Right, and let's just understand. This is like, you could say RNA. You could say there's lots of these molecules, and they're not reproductive until the environment is right for that to happen. They don't just reproduce. There has to be an environment that allows them to reproduce.
This red blob always attracts green blobs, and this purple blob always attracts yellow ones. And piece by piece, all these blobs attract their opposites until their counterparts suddenly snap into position.
Right, and the fact is that's not exactly true. And so, there was a person who said there was, an arsenic on a DNA molecule, blah, blah, blah. And it was just a demonstration that, if you put certain chemicals and allow those chemicals to actually invade cells, that the DNA molecule will end up corrupted because it's going to end up with a bunch of elements in it, okay, that aren't going to work. They look like the right molecule, but they're not. And the only way the cell really maximizes this function, the DNA molecule in a sense it needs the protected environment. It evolves to the protected environment. So it loses any capacity to be able to tell the difference because it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to tell the difference between, some amino acid that has arsenic in it and some amino acid that doesn't have arsenic in it. It doesn't need to tell the difference because the mechanism that's filtering is telling the difference. The filter's catching it. So, there's a whole system that needs to make that DNA molecule reproductive. That's why a cell is so complicated. It has all these things, mitochondria, all these different machines inside the environment, because the whole environment is what's going to evolve, not just the DNA molecule.
Next to the original shape. Now,
it's sort of like, you could argue, sperm cells stay really retarded. They stay very crude, because they can't really evolve, because their DNA doesn't get preserved. The creator of their DNA preserves. So they're a step removed from evolution. So the little machine can't grow laser beams, and it can't, they don't grow tools, fingers and hands to grab each other and strangle each other. They just stay a very simple machine, because they're one step removed from the actual molecule that's producing them.
This shape goes on to do the same thing. Its green blobs attract red ones, and yellow ones attract the purple, until another shape yet again snaps into position. This new shape looks exactly like the original. what just happened fully spontaneously is replication.
Whatever, fully spontaneously. So, was that spontaneous? Did you see the animation? Did anything spontaneous happen? No, it was all stuff moving. It hit, it stuck. You know, there's nothing spontaneous, nothing instantaneous. You know, these are words that physics shouldn't be using.
One shape became two. This marks the birth of the first replicator.
So it's really not, because obviously it's, you know, especially the DNA molecule, it's two different sides, and the two different sides collect the opposite thing, you know, to recreate the other side. So these replicators don't exist in reproducing life. So this isn't the core of the life forms evolving on Earth. You need the double helix.
We don't know exactly what this replicator looked like. It might have been a single standalone molecule or a group of molecules that worked together to replicate. There's a lot of debate on this today, so
so why did you bother with the subject, right? Because yes, it's all open to anyone speculating and defining a more efficient mechanism for creating the end result. And so not a very useful avenue of conversation, frankly. And it's way short of getting to the whole bloody gutty thing. The whole everybody gets murdered part of the game.
Instead, let's represent the replicator as a character. How about this one here?
Fuck.
Perfect. Keep in mind, it's still just a lifeless molecule, one without any intent or purpose. Now, you might think that the chances for the replicator to form were extremely unlikely. But in our void, where we have hundreds of millions of years to play with, what might seem impossible to us becomes virtually inevitable. And the thing is...
So, no evidence for that either. So, it's like I could throw 5 Yahtzee dice, and I could throw them with enough energy that maybe 3 of them could land on top of each other. But I can't throw them with enough energy that 5 of them will stack on top of each other. And then on top of that, I can't, you know, what would be the odds of they all are 5 face up? The number 5 is the top face. I mean, you're talking about things that are, in practical sense, impossible, because even getting them to stack is insanely improbable. Getting them to stack with the same number, I mean, too ridiculously improbable. And every indication is that that molecule, without the eyeballs, because that's just bullshit to put eyeballs on the damn thing and talk about how it's not a machine that thinks. You know, it's just really stupid to say that. It's just a machine. Make it look like a refrigerator or something. It's a little chemical machine. It has very few moving parts, so to speak, changing parts, you know, manipulatable parts. And so, you know, you can't give it functions it doesn't have. And the fact is the improbability of that machine has already been proven on Earth. We're covered with amino acids. It's covered with the building blocks of that machine. And the fact is there's only one version of that ever popped out and did this thing, reproducing cell. It only happened one time where a cell ate another cell and created a nucleic cell. All of these things are one-time events. And there's a ton of them. And they're insanely improbable.
The replicator only has to arise once. Once it's here, it can take the simpler compounds available in the environment to copy itself at a much faster pace. And so it does that until it entirely fills our void. At least that's what...
Okay, so that's bullshit, because that ain't how it happens. Again, the DNA molecule double helix is the only one that does this thing, and it needs to be unzipped. Something needs to cut it in half. A chemical has to cut it.
What you'd expect. But there is a flaw in the process. See, during the replicator's conquest of the void, one of its copies makes a mistake. Perhaps a stray ray of UV light hits it during the replication process, or the replicator uses a building block it wasn't supposed to. As a result, what we're left with is a new shape which is slightly different from its parent, and so its properties might be slightly different too. This error might be harmful. For example, it might make the copy less stable. It could be beneficial, making the copy better at replicating. Or it could be neutral, not changing the replicator in any meaningful way. This marks the final milestone in our void: mutation. Many species of replicators now occupy the void, and what they do is they replicate themselves. The problem is they all...
Yeah, you could compare this a little bit maybe to the isotope problem with, you know, why do molecules stay in certain conditions? You could argue all of hydrogen, right? The hydrogen we always talk about is H2. It's not really a hydrogen atom. There's not free little individual hydrogen atoms. 99% of the hydrogen is two hydrogen atoms stuck to each other and stuck pretty strongly. So there's an illusion, okay, that, you know, the single hydrogen is doing certain things in the environment when it's really this H2 that is capable of doing things in the environment. You know, so I mean, you know, there's lots of details, and this whole evolving of the chemistry is really, it's a different kind of evolution, frankly. So I just don't, I think it's cheating the argument to say that the DNA molecule was evolving before it became a blueprint.
Need the same limited resources, and so our void turns into a battleground. So which replicator will win? What kind of properties will the void favor? Well, let's try to simulate what happens.
Alright, so this is unfortunate. I didn't think the video was just going to be this abiogenesis. He didn't say abiogenesis in the title anywhere. He's really just talking about the creation of an evolving cell. And again, all of this is just speculation. There's no hard science here.
Now, if you're looking to run your own simulations or need a place to run your own code, look...
Oh, fucking commercial. Alright, good place for a break. Alright, so I think I'll just jump through this because it's all just a bunch of statistics and that kind of crap. So he's at the point where he's talking about the fact that these first replicators would be in competition with each other, and the fact is there's going to be some version that's going to be superior to all the spontaneous versions. So if you're just saying if you make 1 million of something, there'll be a couple that are peak performers, the gold medalists, and they're going to take over eventually, and everything else will be suppressed by them because they'll control all the resources. So they'll starve everything else out of existence eventually, and they'll be the dominant chemistry. The catch is, you be the big winner, you use all the resources, and then you all starve to death. So you have to go through all these dying cycles and all of this balancing act where the new version has to have some limitation on its success. If it's going to replicate, it has to kill the old versions off if the new versions are going to survive. So it has to create death. So we'll get maybe to the part where he talks about the creation of death, the necessity of it. Evolution can't really happen without it because there aren't unlimited resources. Oh, I might as well just play this part and see if he talks about death here. I don't want to have to play it and then replay it and blah, blah, blah.
Species replication rate. This factor should depend on the total number of replicators in the void, n, which will also divide with an arbitrary crowding factor, c. C lets us define the maximum number of
see, he's just making up all this stuff. So you can make up any kind of, numbers and ways of eventually creating this circumstance where it has to balance. So if you're going to create a simulation, yeah, the simulation gets filled up with one thing. Eats all the food, just creates a bunch of shit. Well, then you have to have something that turns the shit back into food. So you have to create another replicator, okay, that eats the shit and turns it back into food. Or else you have to be the thing that eats the shit. And that's the sort of the fact of our evolution is that did happen. The original life on Earth ate shit from our perspective, and we became the whatever its byproducts were, which were oxygen and CO2. We became the ones capable of using those molecules to sustain ourselves. And so our ancestors. There's no point in me talking about us. It doesn't have much to do with us. We're 1 billion years from this evolution. 1 billion years. It's a long goddamn time. Alright, so I'll continue playing some of it. I'll see if it gets too... yeah, I'll have to decide for you if it's too tedious for you.
Replicators will allow into the void. Say C is 10,000, then once there are 10,000 replicators, the two terms cancel out and drive the replication rate down to 0, meaning none of the replicators will be able to make copies until the population drops again. So let's see how this changes our simulation. Okay, like the last time, the original replicator starts to grow, after which it's quickly taken over by its mutations. But this time, most of these mutation populations start to decline. Because of the scarce resources, the new best population, the Lime 1, actually starts stealing resources from the others. After that, a few more mutations pop up, even more powerful than the Lime. Ultimately, the purple replicator takes over.
Alright, so basically they're saying that, you know, one of these replicators acquires the arsenic molecule or something. Something sticks to it, and now it uses that as a weapon to destroy things that aren't it. Okay, things that aren't part of its family, so to speak, aren't its design. And so it ends up the beginning of the weapon tree created by the chemistry, just by this process of elimination, you end up making molecules that will start to have weapons. You're weaponizing. You're giving the little pieces of chemistry guns and knives. Yeah. Yeah, let's continue playing it. What the hell?
Occupying around 9,000 of the 10,000 available spaces. It completely curbs all the other populations. It goes without saying that the environment plays a massive role in which replicator wins. If you change the environment, you likely change the outcome. But let's look at the stats of the replicator that came out on top this time. That winning species has a replication rate of 20% compared to the 17% average across all populations. Obviously, being able to replicate quickly pays off here. Its death rate is below average. Replicators that fall apart less quickly can make more copies. And finally, it has a 1% mutation rate, compared to the average of 3.73%. Although mutations help by injecting diversity, for any single species, fewer mutations mean more faithful copies. If we
So obviously the scale, the size of the environment is going to decide all of this. So this environment, you could argue, is 1 million of these little environments. They're all over every rock on the seashore. Each one is a little environment, and then those environments will start competing with each other. The environments will take over each other. So once you have something that is incredibly successful, it will wipe out all those other environments. So I think he's got the scale wrong, and being that the scale is wrong, it's going to end up disfavoring certain capacities. But obviously the rate at which you reproduce is going to be a huge advantage in the fact that you're always going to get there sooner, and whoever gets there sooner, whoever gets to that's sort of like the race. The race is pretty much the finish line. You know, there's no, it doesn't matter how you get there, it just matters that you got there.
If you run the simulation, you'll notice the outcomes are always slightly different. But the winning species consistently have high replication and low death and mutation rates. Now, in the real void, things wouldn't have been as simple. Instead of just tweaking these 3 stats, the replicators would have to mutate all sorts of different ways to gain an advantage.
Right, and mutation would be highly valued in terms of, you know, being able to, that's why sexual reproduction was so, that's why it worked. Is because it was a huge advantage in the sense that when you mix these things together, you end up creating all kinds of monstrosities. And some of those monstrosities will be improvements, a tiny percentage. Alright, well, maybe I'll jump ahead a little, play a little, see if there's anything interesting. I'll let you know. Alright, so now he's talking about how the replicators stumble across these ways to protect themselves and do all this stuff, which isn't in the simulation at all. And this is a lot more complicated, and this has to do with what these chemicals would be, the environments they'd be in. And so I'm just arguing that the obvious thing you could say is that they'd be in water drops. That's where life starts, it's in water. And that these droplets of water are isolated environments in the sense that, let's say there was a chemical in your poo that was very toxic to any other replicator. Then your poo would line your bubble. Okay, and now your bubble is protected. No other kind of replicator can get in and destroy you or poison you because you've poisoned them before they can get into your environment. So you don't need the gun anymore because your environment is shooting them. So there's lots, like I said, this is just so wrong to sit there and say, well, let's make a video where I'm just going to do the Veritasium version of the story. That's like me doing the Gary version of the story. There is a real story. It did happen in a real way and it had these basic rules. But the rules are just this idea of it's just chemistry, it's just little machines made out of chemistry, and it was just circumstance that it went in a certain way that ended up creating these things that could do so much more, these reproducing cells. Without the reproducing cell, you're not going to make a brain. Without the reproducing cell, you're not going to have what we call life.
Making structures to propel themselves around. They develop senses and ways of storing energy. They even mix, exchange, and steal traits from each other.
So he's really jumping now, right? So you're still here, right? So you heard that, right? I mean, he jumped. Now he's got these things acting like whole cells. So now he's got the DNA in the center. He's got these mitochondria in here. He's got little machines in here. He's got, you know, he jumped way ahead. So went from that little blippy thing and just jumped over the whole process of creating a nucleic cell, which is, again, you could write, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of pages to be able to document all of the interactions that had to take place to achieve that transition from single isolated chemical to reproducing cell.
Through billions of years of trial and error,
So there's not billions, there's just like one, frankly. Well, okay, you know, they say, what do they say, 4 billion years ago? I don't think so, but whatever. Continuing.
Scaffolding gets more and more complex, and as a result, the replicator's interactions with the void become exceedingly indirect.
I mean, brains didn't exist until like, whatever, 300 million years ago, so, you know, whatever, it's 400 or something like that. So, you know, and that's when the evolution gets really important.
They build complex survival machines for themselves, machines whose sole purpose is to protect the replicators inside. These machines became such experts at surviving.
I mean, this is jumping so far ahead and not even recognizing that we're made as specialized replicators. The gonads are producing the sperm and the egg. They're the essential bits because they only have half the genetic code. You know, they don't have the full code. And what half is on there, what parts are on there, is different for each one of those eggs and different for each one of those sperm.
They're still around some 4 billion years later. They are the bacteria, plants, fungi, and animals all around you. Everything alive, including you, was built as a survival vessel for these replicators.
Yeah, so yeah, but that's all we are still. We're just a machine too. So it's all, you know, just a machine built around, you know, the DNA molecule, the blueprint. The blueprint is the thing evolving. The blueprint changes based on success and failure at reproducing, and that's it. There's nothing, you know, it's no different. It's just bigger, more complicated. But once you have the cell, then you're just saying you're just gonna, you know, you just have a bunch of them, a bunch of liver cells, a bunch of, you know, pancreas cells, a bunch of kidney cells, a bunch of heart cells.
But today, you'd barely recognize them as replicators. Now, we just call them genes.
All right, so he skipped all over the whole double helix thing. You know, skipped over a lot of what the process is to be able to get to one of those machines that's a cell that can reproduce. I mean, it is very complicated. It has to rip the DNA in half, then it has to let in the new DNA and attach that to the other DNA. I mean, it's just not that simple, you know, in terms of the selfish gene part taking place. And you have to have a machine that can read the DNA, you know, that actually changes the chemical environment as it goes across the chemistry changes, and that decides when something new is going to happen, when it's going to switch to making liver cells, when it's going to switch to making kidney cells.
They're hidden deep within every living creature. Strands of DNA made from the sequences of A, T, G, and C nucleotides. Now, one of the leading theories is that those earliest replicators were actually something closer to RNA molecules.
Duh. Yeah. Yeah, obviously, I think.
But then over time, this must have evolved into a more stable system of storing information.
Right, and then so the RNA became a DNA, and now you had a molecule that you could cut in half. Duh.
The DNA and proteins we use today. They are the code that shapes our traits. We're taught that these traits are here solely to help ensure our survival, the survival of the individual or the species.
But do we have this the wrong way around?
When you have a child, what do you pass on?
So, you know, again, this has already been covered by Dawkins, so he's just stealing Dawkins, and he didn't even get into the punctuated equilibrium of Gould, which was the, you know, really interesting part of evolution, because it explained why there was no missing links. The idea that all the evolution happens in small populations explains why all the missing links are missing from this fossil record, why you don't have a whole ton of them, is because it was tiny populations that were doing all the evolving.
DNA. Yeah, the genes. Okay, yeah.
These tiny replicators are still fighting the same battle that started billions of years ago. And the logic behind them hasn't changed. The traits just become more convoluted. Replicators that produce traits poorly suited to their environment tend to become less common, while those that produce advantageous traits become more numerous in the population.
So it's not about the fittest individual or group, it's fundamentally about the survival of the fittest genes.
Okay, so that's just bullshit. The fittest gene is decided by the person taking the DNA molecule and putting it into another replicator that will be successful. And that's what's essential to the survival of the DNA. My DNA is dead, right? There's not going to be anybody carrying it, so it's dead. It's done for, okay? It's going to rot with my corpse. Fact. So it has nothing to do with the DNA's environment. It has to do with my interaction in the environment. I'm the machine that is carrying the code, and that's all I'm doing. So again, it's just sort of bullshit to say the environment for the DNA molecule is evolving. That's the environment that's really old. That's the epigenetic part. That's the part that's the cell and the mitochondria. All that stuff evolves insanely slowly. The part that evolves fast and actively, like, you know, the 20,000 years between, you know, the human race getting into North America, and then 20,000 years later, the Europeans show up and they can't even recognize people who might have been their brother. I mean, they can't recognize them as being blood. Yeah, okay, so we'll continue from there.
They are the core unit of natural selection. But why would natural selection care exactly for the gene? Why?
All right, so this is silly. Natural selection is a function. It can't care about anything, and it's a simple function. It's just kill or be killed. It's winner take all. It's, yeah, that's all it is. There's nothing else to it. It's a simple process. The selecting process is really simple. Live, die. You know, die too soon. Period. You're done. Musical chairs to the death.
Not something smaller or something bigger.
Well, for something to undergo selection, it needs to have three characteristics. First, it needs to be able to make near identical copies of itself. Second, it needs to exhibit traits that affect its interaction with the environment, which third affect the probability of survival and reproduction of the replicator.
Alright, so this near identical thing doesn't happen. All the sexually reproducing organisms aren't doing near identical. You know, they're combining two, very unlikely to be brother and sister. Okay, genetic code. So it's had some 100 years of separation, or 1,000 years of separation, or 10,000 years of separation. So there could be a huge amount of separation between the molecules that are being combined. And so it's pretty lame to say we're supposed to copy ourselves identically. We're not supposed to be identical copies. You know, the whole advantage is not making something that looks the same as you and acts the same as you. The idea is to make something better than you. That's what you're in competition for. You need to do that, okay, if you're going to stay in the game, because the winner's going to do that. The winner's going to make a copy of himself that's better than him. That's what the winner needs to do. Alright, well, take a break. I just jumped a little bit ahead. So he's talking about how each little piece of chemistry on the DNA molecule can't replicate the molecule, so it does need the whole chromosome.
Affects potentially thousands of traits that could influence its survival, but when most creatures reproduce, sections of chromosomes get swapped around, so a chromosome doesn't stay together as a cohesive replicating unit, and therefore it can't be selected for.
So I don't buy that argument at all. So obviously it can be, but whatever.
But a gene is somewhere in the middle. It's a long enough stretch of DNA that it can independently influence a trait, but it's also short and stable enough to be faithfully copied over into future generations. This is why the gene is the unit of natural selection.
Well, I'd argue that the whole fucking chromosome is, but whatever. You have to have you have to have legs and arms, and all the parts have to work right. So obviously everything is getting replicated without some grotesque error. So obviously everything else has to be working pretty well also. So you can't just modify one piece. One piece of the chromosome is not going to well, could create a fatal error, but it's not going to be able to make you survive. You need all the other pieces to still work. So I think it's a little bit silly to say each one of them is the essential part. But the point is that there's a whole bunch of redundancy in our genetics. So the code is read by something. A molecule travels across this thing and reads the code. And creates chemistry based on it, and it sort of checks itself in the sense that it has this code in another location to make sure that job got done.
This perspective led to one of the most powerful and controversial ways of seeing evolution, one popularized by Richard Dawkins in his book The Selfish Gene. Based on the work of evolutionary biologists in the 1960s and 70s, and as a response against the then very popular group selection theory, Dawkins argued that just about every trait, from animals helping each other to being completely selfish, is a strategy that helped.
All right, so all of that, and you could argue that the genetic component of our behavior is so tiny in terms of you can see that you can create a human being that's a homicidal lunatic, and you can create a human being who's generous and nice and wonderful and pleasant. And all of that is going to be mostly and almost entirely, I would argue, decided by how you hatch it. Okay, so how it comes out of its egg, and how it interacts with every single event. In terms of what's happening to its maturation of its brain, and there's very little instinctive component.
Their genes survive and replicate. Genes that maximize their own survival are the genes that propagate best, even if they do so at the expense of others.
It's almost stupid to talk about evolution in the human context just because our entire tool is now this synthetic brain. it's deciding who lives, who survives, who reproduces, all of that stuff, and it's all about memes. So Dawkins' next book about memes is the evolving of memes is the more important book in a way, because it's basically telling us that, you know, we're done evolving because we're not doing natural selection and we're not doing unnatural eugenics. We're not doing deliberate creation of a human being. All we're doing is exchanging ideas, and the ideas either, like a virus, infect other people or they don't. I could be described as a very ineffective virus, okay, but I'm still here, okay? They haven't eradicated me yet.
Or in Dawkins' words, we are survival machines, robot vehicles blindly programmed to preserve the selfish molecules known as genes.
Right, and this is a guy who later wrote a book called The Greatest Show on Earth. It's obviously not a great show. It's an ugly motherfucking horror. It's just meat grinder all the way down. We're all just Freddy's Nightmare, Edward Scissorhand. You know, we're the whole thing is insidious, just torment and death. You know, with this tiny little laughing stuff you do in between, but it's just grisly. The indignity, the brutality of what the process is going to do to you, due to everything you learned and everything you worked for and everything you acquired as a skill and a capacity to function. It's all just going to be maggot food.
Now, you might think this framework isn't all that groundbreaking.
Yes, exactly. It's just a big pile of you taking advantage of your gullible, silly audience and just talking shit and trying to pretend you're smart. That's all it is. You know, talking shit, too. All these abstract subjects. This is a science that hasn't dropped 4 pounds 1 foot and 1 pound 4 feet and measured the capacity to do work. The weight. Yeah. They haven't turned a scale sideways and then crashed something into it to see how fast it has to go to weigh its weight. They haven't done shit. Okay, and they call themselves scientists. They've been in space for 60 years and they haven't done the experiment that made Einstein famous. And it's really simple. It takes 5 minutes. And they haven't redone it to prove that it actually happens. It's just such garbage science.
I mean, take the emperor penguins in Antarctica, for example. They hesitate to jump into the water until they are sure there are no seals around. So what kind of genes could help a penguin survive in this environment?
So this is, humans do that. Yeah, I don't jump in a pool until my brain says finally, oh, get to it already, you fuck. So yeah, you're just waiting for one seal to say, I don't care if I'm going to die. That's really what they're just going to do. One of them's going to finally say, I don't care. I'm sick of sitting here waiting. Just get it over with. We know what we're going to have to do, so let's get it over with. Let's just do it. And once one of them goes, then they all say, I'm not a chicken, I'm not a chick, I can go too. And that's it.
Well, if the penguin's set of genes make it more likely to be timid, the penguin might stay back until someone braver tests the water. That way the penguin is at a lower risk of being eaten and has a better chance of surviving.
Right, but if he doesn't, you know, this is always the balance, right? So these are horrible circumstances these organisms are in, right? So you can do the antelope having to go across the crocodile river in Africa, you know, because they have to migrate to the better grass. They've eaten all the grass on this side of the river. They have to cross the river. The river's full of these freaking crocodiles just waiting for the free meal. You know, wildebeest, all kinds of animals have to do this. And it's brutal because, yeah, the courageous ones get the job done, okay, but they're more higher likelihood of getting eaten, okay? But the ones that don't go get a higher likelihood of never going and then starving to death. So it's a silly, horrible balance. It's disgusting that organisms were put in this horrible circumstance. Absolutely horrible. I mean, the stress, you know, you can see it. You can watch the stress just eating these organisms up.
Reproducing and passing on its timid genes. Here, you can think about this either as the timid genes help the penguin, or the penguin helps the timid genes. Either way works.
So is there any real benefit to viewing things from the genes' perspective? Well, look at what happens when you use these two frameworks to explain altruistic behavior.
Oh, so this baby talk about altruistic behavior again, especially in the context where we're obviously nationalistic, racist, nepotistic. We're all these negative things. So why are we pretending that there's such a thing as this altruism? You know, we are only generous when we make it in our own interest, when we convince the ape inside of us that it's somehow in your interest to be a nice guy. It's going to be profitable. You know, so yeah, that's the part just too disgusting. Talking about altruism. It just, we just can't do it honestly. I wish we could, but we really can't. It's always in some way or another a show. I'm going to prove that I'm a nice guy by being a nice guy, even though I don't have much personal use for being a nice guy. I'm going to prove it because it's profitable. Nah, leave us continue.
Which appears in a lot of places in nature.
Take California ground squirrels, for example. Females will let out alarm calls if they spot a predator, like a fox or a hawk, to warn other nearby squirrels, even though this puts her survival at risk. The genes influencing this behavior surely don't help this squirrel. But can the squirrel still help the genes?
I think this is a bit more clear if you think about the fact that most living things reproduce sexually.
Right.
So a squirrel will get half its DNA from its mom and half from its dad, so it's actually sharing half its genes with each parent.
Right, so I don't know what this has to do with the behavior itself, which is obviously in the interest of your sisters and brothers and your own children, for fuck's sake. So you're basically saving your own children, which is so obviously to your advantage of getting your genetics into the future. Your children become everything. So again, this is like a pride of lions or something. I mean, obviously there's a huge advantage to the sisters, they're generally sisters, taking care of each other's cubs. It's not a big giant leap to understand that as a advantageous evolutionary function, especially when you're going to be in wars, okay, with herds of other things. It's not a single hyena that's going to come for your cubs. It's going to be a group of hyenas.
But also, any child that it has, it's also going to share half of its genes with the child, but also any siblings. But then if you take a step out to an uncle or up to a grandparent, then it's sharing 1/4, and then another step out is 1/8. All to say, you share a lot of genes with your immediate family. And California ground squirrels, females in particular, they live around family.
So if a squirrel has a set of genes that make her call out when she spots a predator, there is a very good chance that the squirrels that hear her warning call also carry those genes. Now, as a result of her alarm call, let's say the squirrel attracts a predator her way and it ends up getting eaten. This action costs the call genes the chance to pass themselves on to any future offspring in that squirrel. But if the warning call saved at least 2 copies of those genes in 2 of the squirrel's relatives, well then in total, these 2 squirrels have a better chance of passing.
So again, he didn't even use the real example. The real world example is it's already a mother who's produced babies, and the babies are still around, and she's warning her own children. Her own sister even.
On the genes through their offspring than that single squirrel did. From the gene's perspective, this could be a good trade-off. It doesn't matter which individual helps the genes replicate, only that as many copies as possible survive.
This principle, that altruistically helping your close relatives helps preserve your own genes, is known as kin selection.
And the payoff behind any altruistic gesture under kin selection depends heavily on how related you are to the individuals you're helping. Because the less related you are, the smaller the chances that you will share that particular gene with another individual.
Right, so this is where the selfish gene migrates into the interesting meme. Because we can replace that instinct with the knowledge, the better knowledge, that I don't have to see it as my kid. I can just see it as child. And I can recognize all children need feeding, all children need maturation, all children need to be tool enabled in the world. All of them deserve, okay, your big brother love kind of thing, or whatever you want to call it. They all need, okay, based on what they are, not what you are. So you can understand the need that all of them need to be cared for, to become competent and useful adults. So you can break this obligation that it be just about my genetics and understand it's about any sentient organism. So again, it's sort of just, this is the immature conversation about evolution, in my opinion.
And you can see this in nature. Male squirrels that don't live near relatives almost never give out warning calls. Now, there is a big question.
So he's talking about males now versus females, right? And the males don't have the same incentives in terms of they're just there to be rapey. Okay, they're there to get their semen, their sperm into as many females as they can, to further their code. So their self-interest is completely different, and especially when they're not hanging around parents, especially if they're not going to be hanging around doing the fatherly protecting of the young bullshit. So obviously I think he's cheating the argument not to recognize that the males in those squirrel populations are mostly rogue and like a bull elephant or something, and they're really not playing a family game. They're interested in pollinating. They're not interested in child raising.
This gene-centric view still has to address. If selection really favors genes that replicate well, then why would sex ever evolve as a means of replication if it throws...
It evolved as a means of mutation. So again, that's the whole point. It's trying not to create exact copies. Exact copies aren't as useful. You need something that's better than you, because the winner is going to be better than his parents. That's going to be the fact. The fact is the person that's going to win the gold medal is going to be better than his parents. It's just going to be a fact. And so if you want to be that winner, you're going to have to be better than your parents.
Away roughly half the genes.
Most animals reproduce sexually, so why do it when some organisms, like certain plants and fungi, get to pass on all of their genes through asexual reproduction? From a gene...
Yeah, and they're all really simple organisms. So again, you're cheating the argument again. They got simple environments they exploit by very simple rules. So they're not doing any adaptation to any environment. They're not adapting to predators. They're not doing a damn thing that's very creative.
Perspective, this seems like a much better deal.
They're like sperm. They're a level detached from the direct evolution that we're involved in, being demonstrating models for a DNA molecule. They can't be, in the sense that they all are carrying the same genetics. There's no competition between each other, clearly, because they're not mutating very fast.
When it comes to sexual reproduction, people like to say, okay, well, it mixes up the genes. It's like shuffling a deck of cards, and isn't that better for creating more variation? And clearly, like, that's advantageous.
Another way this has been explained
he says people say it, and then he doesn't do any counter argument. It's a very good argument. That's right. That's exactly why there is sexual reproduction, is because it instantly creates a mutation. It's a guaranteed mutation.
If the genes that regulate sexual reproduction benefit from replicating sexually, then they're going to keep pushing for these genes.
Right.
Even if it's a net negative to all the other genes in the genome.
Yeah.
So if it benefits them, they'll keep pushing for it.
So are there any problems with how the selfish gene explains natural selection? Well, Yes, I mean, it turns out the framework comes with a lot of controversy.
Like what?
One of the biggest criticisms against the selfish gene is that it leaves little to chance.
This is nonsense, right? The only criticism is in the language, because people don't want to be called selfish. They don't want the negative label placed on their function. But that's it. But the idea, okay, that it's machine warfare is just an absolute fact. And that the machine is the code, the blueprint. And the blueprint is the only thing that matters in the process, because it's the only thing that can get to the future. You can't get to the future. Only the DNA molecule can get to the future. Only the genome can get to the future. You can't get there.
Chance.
It implies that every gene present in the genome is there because it actively got selected for by natural selection over many generations.
But many genes are actually invisible to natural selection because they don't really exhibit meaningful traits in the population. Yet they can still evolve over time.
Yeah, there's lots of error code, there's redundancy, there's appendixes. You've got lots of appendixes in your genetic code because it doesn't really break the functionality of the code. It doesn't matter, you know, little tiny bacteria can have 1,000 strands of DNA, you know, and we have whatever, 100 or something. So I mean, you know, it's how it configures, you know, but it doesn't really worry about a few extra miles of code that doesn't do anything. And the fact is that dead code could possibly do something. So it could be mutated from something very recessive to something active. It could be turned on. And that happens, okay? There's tail code in your genetics, right? There's code that makes a tail on you. And it's in your genetic code. And every now and then a human is born where that code is turned on and you got a pretty shitty, but a tail. It's a fact. Okay, so that's, you know, that's just showing that it's not a designed process, that it is being run just by this action in the universe. There's no intelligent designer. There's nobody architecting. Okay, it is just natural selection, and natural selection is sloppy. And that's the simple word. It's sloppy.
Imagine 20 blind cavefish, 10 with green eyes and 10 with blue. Since they're blind, we'll assume that their eye color traits make no difference to their survival,
So why would you say that? Because it's not true. So we know that it probably does make some difference.
they get passed down purely by chance. Now, to form the next generation, randomly pick any fish from the first group and replicate it. If you repeat this 20 times, you get a second generation. By chance alone, one color will probably appear more often than the other, and if you repeat this process over and over many generations, one color might eventually completely take over. That's not because it's better, but purely due to random sampling. This shift
might. Okay, what does that mean? It doesn't mean much. It's what it doesn't mean. And again, why would you think that it wouldn't make any difference at all when you have birds that collect just blue things? You have all kinds of, peacock feathers, and you have all kinds of color signals that animals are sending to each other. Preferable colors, unpreferable colors, colors that create visceral negative reactions, colors that produce visceral positive reaction. So just bullshit to just say that there's some feature that has no history and can have no future, and that it is just some sort of nothing code. There's no such thing as nothing code. It's always there for some reason. It must at some point have been relevant. It can't just be irrelevant and exist.
in the frequency of gene variants is called genetic drift. It's most apparent in small populations and for traits that aren't pruned by natural selection. But it doesn't only apply to silent genes.
So this is all his say-so, and we're just supposed to believe so.
Even when genes exhibit meaningful traits, there is a chance that genetic drift overrides natural selection and a less fit gene will spread through the population just by chance.
Look, it's not about it being less fit in the sense that it did win. So, so again, it's a silly. I mean, this is like arguing about how people feel on the day of the Olympics, right? You could have a headache and you lose. So you would have won the gold medal if you didn't have a headache. Well, yeah, that happens. Stuff wins that shouldn't win. Duh. So what? You know, that's newsflash stuff. Wow. I couldn't figure that out on my own? Yeah, I think I could.
Look back at our replicator battle. If we run our simulation enough times, sometimes the winning gene won't be the one with traits.
So these aren't winning. This is, simulation is so trivial compared to the real game.
That maximize its own survival. Here, you can see that the winning population actually has a higher than average mutation rate, just by chance. And the average mutation rate is also higher than the starting value.
Yeah, they're only starting with these 5 features that something can have, and obviously 4 things could be off and only 1 thing is on. And you know, this is obviously you're going to have very variant outcomes. But if you start dealing with these more complex organisms, the subtlety of the difference between them is almost meaningless compared to the meme war.
These are simplified examples, but there is an ongoing argument about how much of evolution was actually due to natural selection and how much of it was up to chance. Another major criticism of the selfish gene is about the...
I just can't believe they'd even use the word chance. You know, but I mean, obviously, sometimes the best doesn't win because it's the wrong day. You're unlucky. A tree branch falls on you. You know, what the fuck? It didn't have anything to do with how fit you are. You're just damn unlucky.
Unavoidable implication behind the word selfish. It seems to imply that genes have agency.
Yeah, right. It implies something that just seems negative when all it was to be was a metaphor for the idea that it's the space on the genome that the little chemistry is really fighting for. That's the real battle, is whether there's this chemical here or that chemical there, or whose chemical where. And that's really what's going to change what happens in the world, is where those damn chemicals are.
Like they know what they're doing and they understand the consequences, but it's only a metaphor, just as portraying them as characters was a way for us to make the story.
Yes, and you put eyeballs on these characters that don't have any brain, which really is a shitty thing to do. Without a brain, an eyeball ain't going to do you much good.
More engaging. Of course, molecules don't know what they're doing. They don't decide to replicate or conspire to outcompete others. They just react according to the law.
Right, and that's all we're doing. So in a sense, okay, we don't know what we are doing. But the fact is, in this context of the fact that I can know all of this stuff about this environment means I can know what I am doing. All right, in the sense that my reactions are all going to be inevitable. I can't change this machine into some other machine. It produces Coke or produces whatever, Pepsi, you know, and it's going to do it in this way, and I can't make the machine different than the machine is. And I can't change how the environment's evolving in front of me, how it's changing. I'm going to have to deal with how I'm going to step on, whether my shoe gets wet or, you know, a tick bites me, all of that crap. But some of this stuff I do control, in the sense that my map gives me a path to take. But I can't fix the fact that I can't know all the subtleties of these roads. So the road my brain picks, it doesn't see the pit of quicksand at the end. It doesn't see the pitfalls of all these roads. So I make choices that suck and are stupid, okay, in hindsight. But only in hindsight. So in a sense, you know, we're machines. We don't have any free will or volition of any kind besides just being controlled by our electrons and our protons. Our electrons and protons are doing all this stuff before we do it. The atoms are doing it. The chemistry is doing it. You're not doing it. There's no you doing it. The chemistry is doing it. The electricity traveling across the chemistry is doing it. It's the thing being controlled. It's the thing in the environment where it's being pushed around. You're not being pushed around. your little bits are being pushed around.
Laws of physics. So what may look like intention is just simple chemistry that happens to work well.
Yes, that's all we are too. So again, that's the joke of it all. But yes, obviously in this context of us being sentient and having this bizarre capacity produced by our brains to have this sensation of horror and terror and pain and agony. I mean, I had a leg cramp tonight, you know, and it was just it's so obnoxious, you know, and, you know, I don't have I don't sleep on the floor, but I sleep close enough. And you can't even get up quick enough to try to get, you know, it's just this insane pain. And it's just, you know, what the fuck is that about? But there's there's probably an actual evolutionary purpose that first had. And that it wasn't just wasted pain, that it was for some fucking purpose. And it's just been, you know, twisted by the fact that we can survive it. We survive having these defects. And, you know, that were once some kind of good thing, and now that's turned into a shitty thing, but we survive it so it doesn't get in the way. It doesn't mean that you won't be able to get married. It doesn't mean that you won't have sex. You know, so it doesn't get in the way of the replicating molecule getting replicated, but it just is annoying as fuck for you in your life. And the evolution process doesn't care if you're annoyed. It only cares when you become disabled and dysfunctional. It doesn't really care that it's tormenting you, as long as you keep pushing through it.
And propagates. But perhaps the most obvious and easiest to understand criticism is that the whole framework is an oversimplification.
Well, it really wasn't intended to be anything but an oversimplification. That was the whole point of the book, is just to sit there and take your eye off the demonstration models and their little pretending that their story is somehow interesting and important, and put it on the thing that's actually changing, which is the DNA molecule. It's the thing evolving, and you're just a tool of that evolution. You are not the thing evolving. The fucking molecule is the thing evolving.
And that's true. Genes are much more complicated than we thought. It's not as simple as one gene.
Yeah, it is. It is pretty simple. I'm just saying, I mean, as a mechanism of understanding, it's just a code, a sequence like the Matrix. It's just little these dots and dashes, and this adds up to an environment, a building, a this, a that, a this. That's all this code is doing, is writing the blueprint for the process of making one of these biological machines. You put the, you know, you screw the, you know, the arm in here, you screw the leg in there. That's all it's doing.
Equals one trait. One gene can influence many traits, and one trait can be influenced by many genes. There are genes that are wholly contained within other genes. There are genes that inhibit or activate others, and then there are even genes that seem to not encode for anything, the so-called non-coding DNA. All to say, we still have a lot to learn.
Yes, but they all have to just cause a reaction. So every single one of them means a chemical reaction, and that chemical reaction has an effect on the ultimate process of making a person. And it is chemistry. I mean, it doesn't work by electricity, you know. So it is a really interesting process that all of that happens, and that you can make these, you know, you can make a tadpole in 2 weeks or whatever. You know, it is amazing once the process is set free and loose, how quickly it can build one of these machines.
About genes. Not to mention that the environment itself, like whether it's hot or cold or how much food there is, also affects how different genes get expressed. Genes are much like...
I don't buy that one at all, so I think that's absolute bullshit. Okay, how cold it is decides how your genes get expressed. Oh, that's a reach. I mean, just because, yeah, I guess if you have some sickness and you have a high temperature, you know, no, you're not going to change the genes in your sperm, so it's just, it can't really do anything. I suppose there's a possibility it still seems thin. Very thin.
Less deterministic than they might seem.
So you might think that a single gene would rarely have a large enough effect that natural selection can directly impact it. But it doesn't matter how convoluted the pathway is. If a gene has a measurable effect on its own survival and replication, it will be subject to some amount of natural selection. And surely
I guess you could argue that, look, the gene is being expressed in more than one environment. It's living inside the nucleus, inside of a bunch of chemistry, and it has to survive in that chemistry. It has to not get hit by ultraviolet light. It has to survive its environment to maintain itself, and then it also has to get the thing it built into the future. It has to make it enabled to get into the future. So it has to survive only its local environment. It has to survive your projection of its design features into the world. It has to do both things. It has to survive the tiny micro world and the macro world. It has to survive in both of those worlds. I think that's the more reasonable takeaway. It's surviving in both the tiny universe, and it has to survive in this big universe.
whole theory is a simplification, but any theory or framework of nature is. And what we're covering in this video is an even more simplified picture of that framework. But
no, you're just talking some crap of speculating, blah, 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 about stuff that was already nailed in the 70s. So, this is just pretending to take old science and make it new again. And sorry, you didn't do that. I mean, Dawkins' book was pretty thick. It goes through an awful lot of crap.
that doesn't take away the fact that viewing the world through this lens has an incredible power to help us understand the process.
Oh, bullshit. Okay. What people need to do is just smell the reality and recognize that we're not doing a very good job of living. What's going on this planet is not winning. It's dupish failure on an insane scale.
Of evolution.
It helps us understand why we see such a range of different behaviors in our world, because fundamentally those traits tend to cause...
So there isn't this big range. There's predators and prey. That's the two big categories. And there's an awful lot of teeth involved, right? And eyeballs for seeing you with, and then teeth to chew you to bits with. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of mouth and ass.
Cause the increasing prevalence of the genes they're associated with.
It's like the whole point is figure out what's true. Like, get to the truth. And this...
Oh, disgusting. You just have no respect for that concept at all, you fake phony physicists with your fake phony bullshit relativity crap. This is a guy who thinks the Earth, so somehow the Earth is pushing you somewhere. Your velocity is that way. You're not getting pushed into the Earth. You're being ejected by the Earth. Too ridiculous.
To me, is the baseline truth of evolution. Is what I love about Making Veritasium is that we get to sort of...
especially now, because you have a whole team of creepoids that you invite in to talk shit, and it's all shit, frankly. Obtuse bullshit. Electricity. Electrons travel through the fucking wire. That's electricity. If the electrons don't move through the atoms of the wire, nothing else happens. There's no electricity, and there's no induction, and there's no anything else. You dumb fuck.
Unpack and dig under the hood, and...
So they don't do any of this. Again, they have tested nothing. Nothing. And they claim because the cesium clock is affected by velocity that somehow we're supposed to believe that there's this time dilation horseshit and all this other crap, that space is relative and it contracts and it expands and it does all this nonsense. And, they don't have proof of any of this shit.
It's what I loved about reading the Selfish Gene book. So it really opened my eyes to this, you know, previously.
So it took them that long. Wow, that's a long time to decide to read the book. It's like 20 years old.
I was just probably thought at the level of the individual, but it makes more sense to think at the level of the gene.
It makes more sense to recognize that on both levels, the molecule has to survive. It has to survive in the tiny verse and this big verse. You know. Yeah, I don't know how else to, you know. It's living, you know, in the bigger world. You know, we live in a world full of galaxies and other crap, but they do absolutely nothing. They don't interact with us. We don't interact with much compared to what a hunk of DNA is interacting with, because it's not only in this very active world, it's pushing it all over the place and jiggling it and heating it and cooling it and doing all this stuff. It's also in this bubble that's bouncing all over the place, and it's in this world that we're going to go into and decide whether that piece of code gets injected and accepted, and fertilization takes place, and everything goes okay, and the baby is born, and then it is able to survive in the environment. All of that has to happen. That's the world it's living in. What you're doing on this planet isn't going to affect any of the galaxies. It's not going to affect anything. It doesn't go any further than right here in this stupid little conversation. And when this Earth is incinerated, or when this Earth is made less, when its vulnerability is exposed, that's going to be the end of all of this crap that we think is so important. Anyway, all hype.
The feeling that you and every other living organism is being driven by some molecules deep in every cell is fundamentally unsettling.
So again, it's really such a tiny part of the real game, which is the evolution of our ideas, the conversation, the thoughts in our head. That's what we're really living. And we have to do it in the context of these crude physical sensations. But we know how connected our thoughts are to our sensations, how connected our memories are to our feelings, how all of that happens. So we're electrical organisms. We're the electricity in our neurons that's creating a pattern and that creates our consciousness and stores every bit of our knowledge and our connections to things. The genetics is just, it's nothing. It's not a significant part of what makes it interesting or important to be sentient and alive. The brain it has as much potential to do this meme idea evolution as there is in the physical evolution. The physical evolution is, again, it's trivial in terms of its meaning compared to the meaning of our understanding and our intelligence and using it well. And the fact is, these people aren't going to help people use it well.
And seems to remove agency from you as a acting, thinking.
Well, duh. The removal of agency was apparent. For a long time, people have recognized the fact that there's no room in the material physics for any notion of an agent. I mean, Descartes kind of made the point when he pointed out that the energy just moves from shit to shit, and you can't do anything about that movement. The logical consequence is obvious. The rules are so simple for the migration of that motion, and there's no room in it for any kind of, I did it. No, you didn't.
Being in the world.
Yeah, it's pretty grim, but
oh, it's pretty grim. Oh, so they're all grimmed about their lack of free will, and they didn't make one sentence about the dismal prospect of being degraded in your function and brutally murdered. Yeah. Now that's not an important feature of the game.
Whether or not you agree with the fact that we might be controlled by our genes and we're simply there.
Alright, so we know we're not controlled by the genes, so that's, again, it's just silly to say. It's a tiny percentage of what you are. It builds the basic machinery, but it's like saying the computer is pre-programmed. And it's, you know, no, it has functions. It has, you know, inputs and outputs. You know, it has USB ports and it has video card. It has these different things, but it's the software that makes it do something useful. We're software, not hardware. I mean, the software makes us characters. The software makes us personalities. The software makes us even intelligent, not the hardware.
Flesh robots.
Right.
I think it's kind of unreasonable and unrealistic to go through life thinking that every decision is governed by this. It doesn't really...
How's it unrealistic? It's not a problem at all. I don't need to, it doesn't hurt me, it doesn't hurt my ego one little bit for me to say, me brain did it. Because that's what did it. My brain did it. My brain made me into this, okay? It's making me. It's producing my sentences. I already know I'm not doing it. But I don't even know what the fuck I'm going to say. Did I know I was going to say, what the fuck did I say? I didn't know I was going to say that. I didn't know I was going to go, I didn't know I was going to say that. I didn't know I was going to do this. So what? I don't know what me is going to do exactly. But I have seen me do me before. So I know generally how me is going to behave. But I'm not doing it. I'm sitting here watching me be me. How is that a crisis? How is it a crisis for me to concede my brain is going to do me, okay, and sometimes I'm going to like what me did, and then sometimes I'm not going to like what me did, and I'm going to say, God damn it, why did I get mad? Oh, God damn it, why did I say that? I mean, I shouldn't have said that. I should have said something like, oh, stop it, poopy head, instead of saying that, go fuck your mother, you motherfucker. And, yeah, I shouldn't have done all that crap. So what's the point of talking about me? Okay, why do I need to say I made me when it's obvious the environment made me? I didn't do it. I didn't make me. I'm a victim of being me. I'm sitting here watching and stuck. I'm stuck with being me. I can't be you. I can't be something else. I am stuck being me. So what? Oh, this is so juvenile. Look at this guy. Ugh. It's like 14.
Do you any good? Because we perceive the world as individuals. So I think it's very beneficial to see yourself as your own thing, as your own, unit.
Whatever. You can't help but see yourself as your own unit because you feel your penis. You don't feel somebody else's. I mean, God damn it. Yes, if I felt what your penis is feeling, yeah, then I'd be insanely interested in what you're doing with my feeling penis. Okay, but no, you don't. Oh, it's just so funny. Of course I have to be insanely self-interested because I only feel my feelings, my brain, the ones it creates are the only ones that really can hurt me. Really can hurt me directly. I mean, obviously I can be insanely hurt if someone I have become attached to and cherish, like even a cat, and something horrible happens. I mean, obviously I'm going to be devastated. So I can be hurt by what happens to others, but I can't literally feel their pain. And until that happens, we're stuck being selfish cunts to some extent. But what a garbage video. Oh, good, it's over.
I want to give a big shout out to Joe Hansen from Be Smart for helping us out with this video, and another shout out to Primer for letting us adapt his simulation on the first replicators. I have put links to their channels down in...
Alright, so it's not even my content, but it's just because I'm a very popular channel, I can just, plagiarize all kinds of stuff and just give them a little tiny shout out. And Yeah, it's just such bullshit. Oh, he's exploiting this. These fucking, science for money. Ew. 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 Alright, so anyway, enough of a video. Yeah, it's a long one. And such and so forth and whatnot. Blah, 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 blah. But it is the most important subject I think your brain needs to grok, is the fact that that's all we are in this steaming universe, is complicated chemistry. And it's really all of this antics about being a functional and winning and competing and blah, blah. It's all just a horrible tragedy that we would play such a silly game, especially when the robots can feel. Really fucking stupid.